struggle with fear, control, anxiety, anger, and that's enough. Tonight, on this wonderful Friday night, I have the honor to introduce George. Jeff and I went to Wilmington about a year and a half ago, 2 years, has it been that long? He has a wonderful, thriving Celebrate Recovery. We had a wonderful time. He told me about George, but I didn't realize there was anybody as crazy as Jeff. He's just about as crazy as Jeff. We had a wonderful time, and we are delighted to have George with us tonight. We saw a mini testimony, I think, by George one time, but we're delighted to have him tonight in person. So, George, if you will come up, let's give him a warm
My name's George and I'm a believer. I'm in recovery from drug addiction and I'm a struggling hypocrite. I'm extremely judgmental, I'm a liar and a thief. So it's real important for me to let you know what I really am. And if you knew what I thought, you probably wouldn't want me here tonight anyway. So, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, all right. It's a humbling experience to get asked to come to a church and to speak and to broken, hurting people, you know, because from my past and what I have done, you know, someone like me doesn't deserve this honor. So we're going to see what happens. Somebody said, are you speaking tonight? I hope not. I hope you don't hear me. I hope you hear God and what He's doing through me. So, and it's not my Celebrate Recovery. Let me clarify that. It's Jesus is the leader of our Celebrate Recovery. I just get an opportunity to participate, and I'm grateful for that. It's probably about 8 years ago, I was standing on a mountaintop in West Virginia on a mission trip, and I was just crying out, God, please help me. I mean, please help me. I was married with 3 children. I had a successful business. I was an active church member. I'd met this Jesus fella, you know, and started pursuing a relationship. I was a soccer coach, scout leader, you know, in a prayer group, involved in doing all the right things. Looking real good on the out. I didn't even look like I do now. I was clean cut, you know, trying to look socially acceptable and dying. I was dying on the inside. I'd been clean for many years. I quit doing what I had to do to stay clean and went off on a religious zeal and started getting high again. And I was putting it before 4 of the most precious things in my life. My wife and my children. You know, I got a real big God. And I don't know if any of y'all understand the hold. That hold, and when we put something in front of us before God, that hold kind of appears and we stuff it with whatever our hurt, habit, or hang-up is, you know. And so I got a really big God, and I don't need to tell you how I use drugs. My drug of choice was more. So I could never get enough, and today I can't eat 1 Oreo cookie, you know. I understand the obsession and the compulsion, but the last day I had to get high was December the 11th of 2004, and it was our youngest child's 4th birthday, and I had tried to convince my family, because immediately I started changing, my actions were changing, and I tried to convince my family that they were crazy. That I wasn't getting high, not me. I'd been clean a long time. It wasn't me. You're confused, you know. And I was trying to convince them that what they were seeing that was a lie. But it was my youngest child's last birthday, and I was in the bathroom, you know. I do a lot of my dirty work in the bathroom, used to, you know. But I was in the bathroom, and my wife came in, and she caught me red-handed. And I believe at that moment, if she'd had a gun, she'd have shot me. And I had a teenage daughter. She came running down the stairs, and she said, "Daddy, I hate you. I wish you would die." and my 2 sons who I coached and was their mentor and their guide and all this stuff, they just couldn't look at me. They just cried. You know, I was their hero, and I was broken and beaten and humbled. Police were called, came to the house. We lived in a big house in a real nice neighborhood, you know, and looking good and handcuffed, and all the neighbors were out pointing at me. You know, there he is, you know. And I was broken. I was beaten, and I was humbled. And then when they placed me in the back of that police car, I knew that God had answered my prayer. You know, I don't believe that God causes bad things to happen to me. My God's a loving and caring God. He don't cause bad things to happen. He allows things to occur in my life to get my attention. You know, and God allowed some things to happen so I could be humbled. And, you know, I told you I had this relationship with Jesus. Well, when I lost everything, I lost my wife, my children, even my church said, get out of here, your kind does not need to be here. I lost everything. And the only thing I had was Jesus. That was the only thing that was there. And, you know, and I sat there and how could someone like me make a difference? How could someone like me that had done so much pain, you know, make a difference? And I had to leave home thinking that, you know, my marriage was over. Children didn't love me. My business was a mess. You know, but I knew God had answered that prayer. And, you know, when I was doing my thing and I thought I was so alone because I felt so guilty and so ashamed because I had met this Jesus guy and I was doing my thing and I couldn't feel him. You know, so I was trying to do all these wonderful things so I could feel him. Well, it ain't about that. You know, it's about surrender. And for me, and I couldn't surrender because I couldn't be honest with you guys. And just, all he said, he just kept telling me, George, just tell somebody you're getting high. But my pride wouldn't let me do that, you know. And I realized that at those times when I felt so alone that God was the closest to me. You know, because at those moments when I felt so alone and I was in the midst of the storm, that he carried me. And the whole time he was just holding me, going like, George, it's going to be okay. I got this. It's going to be all right. You know, so tonight if you're in the storm and you got some crap going on in your life and you're like, man, God's right there. He's right there just holding you, nurturing, and carrying you through the mess. You know, he's right there with you. So I had to go live in a halfway house with other drug addicts. And when I went there, I knew I was never alone. And that God don't make no junk. And he had a plan for his lost son, George. You know, I understand the prodigal. You know, I understand the prodigal. You know, it was nice to be active in recovery again. You know, and when the lie that I was living came to abreast and people knew, what a relief. I didn't have to live in the sickness no more. You know, I could move on in the process, you know, and I talk to God every day, God, please help me. You know, I didn't have to do some profound prayer or nothing. It's just, please help me, God. He understands. He knew what I needed. You know, and if I didn't go out and tear it, you know, get high that day or wreak some havoc on somebody else, I'd say thank you. Just keep it that simple. And I had about 3 weeks clean, and I got a phone call from a man, and he said, George, I would like to be on you to be on the spiritual team. And this journey, I want you to be on this team and on this spiritual journey. And this is the same journey about 6 years earlier I went on and I'd met Jesus. And he said, I'd really like for you to come and be with the team. And I told you this church that I was involved in, you know, some people I was threatened, said, if your kind ever comes around here, I will knock you out. A sinner like you, what you did to your family, you don't belong here. You know, and a lot of these people in this church got word that George was invited to go on a spiritual journey. You know, to be a guide for some men. And I was told that I was a poor example of a Christian, that a Christian like me or a person like me doesn't need to hang out with good Christian folk. Needless to say, that I love Jesus, but I could care less for church people, at this time, and that's where I was at. And I called this guy up that asked me to come, and I said, this is what's going on in my life. I said, man, I have destroyed my family. I've relapsed. My life's a mess. My kids hate me. I am struggling, and I understand if you don't want me there. I understand. But that's where I'm at, and that's what's going on in my life. And he sat there quiet for a minute, and he said, that's one of the best examples of a Christian I've heard in a long time. It is through my weakness that I show God's strength. I can tell you all the great things I do, but if I'm not real and transparent with you, then I can't show you what God's doing in my life. And he said, I'd love to have you on the team. And there was people on the team that were adamant I shouldn't be there. That someone like me should not hang out with good Christian folk, And so I went on this journey, and there was one man. And he was my prayer partner. And he didn't know me. I'd seen him, but he didn't know me. The first day we got together, he just said, tell me about yourself, And I told him what was going on in my life. He didn't point a finger. He didn't judge me. He didn't condemn me. He loved me. And he loved me like Christ loved me. In spite of what I had done, he loved me unconditionally. And he prayed for me, and he looked out for me, and he was there. When I was so unlovable, he was there. And it was because of his love I didn't leave the church. One man, I didn't leave. And before that weekend was out, I had the opportunity to go to the cross. And throughout my journey in recovery, I had surrendered bits and pieces. God, you can have this and you can have this, but you can't have that. I got to hold on to that. I got to keep that. And in this relationship with Christ and what I've learned and studied is he don't want crumbs. He wants it all. God wants all that I have. And I went to the cross and I said, I surrender. And it was snots and boogers, and that was the most painful thing I've ever done in my life, because some of that stuff I thought I needed to survive. And little did I realize that God had a whole bunch more, And that's a scary thing to surrender. So if you got something you're holding on to and you want to know, why ain't I ready to get, that's okay that you're afraid, But so I surrendered at the cross, and before that weekend was out, God spoke to me in a loud and clear voice, and he said, George, I got a job for you. Well, me? And he said, George, I got a job for you. And I was like, God, who am I? He said, George, I want you to bring Jesus Christ to addicts. I'm like, God, I can't even stay clean. Who am I to bring Jesus Christ to addicts? He said, you've been there. You know what it's like to be an addict, and you love me. And that's all you need to know, So I left this weekend with this purpose in life. I told you my business was a shambles. It was a mess. It was a freaking mess. And but God had given me a job. I didn't come here to recovery because I had a work problem. Came here because I had a drug problem. So I had to focus on my drug problem. Well, and God said, I want you to bring Jesus Christ to addicts. He didn't say, I want you to work and straighten out all this kind of stuff. And so I worked less in that first year than I ever had in my entire life. Made more money ever. The business was the most successful it has ever been. Was able to support me and my family where they were, was able to pay off debts and bills and all that. It was amazing when my priorities changed. When I put God first and recovery first in my life, everything else just falls into place. That's the deal. My wife and my kids, they didn't like me. And they struggled. I called my children every day and told them that I loved them. I told them that I understood how they felt. I understood that I was very proud of them. The humanness in me wants to make you, to fix you or make you understand where I'm at. But the Christ in me isn't about being understood. It's about understanding. It's about understanding what part I play in things, And And that was a hard lesson to learn. That was difficult because I wanted to fix them. And I ain't got that kind of power. The only person I can fix is me. That's the only thing I can change is me, you know, and I had to do that. And, found out about the plight of some addicts in Guyana. And Guyana is a country in South America, and they speak English. And it's dirt poor. I mean, they were real poor. And so we, those guys in the recovery house started getting literature together, recovery literature to send to Guyana. And I knew some people that were going on this trip, and I asked them, would you take the stuff to Guyana? If we get it, will you take it? And they were like, sure, sure. And we got all this literature together, and then my wife called me. She said, you know, I've been invited to go to Guyana with these people. And she said, what do you think? I said, well, you deserve a vacation. She'd been through some junk, and we weren't talking. And so she decided to go to Guyana. And she thought she was going to Guyana to build an orphanage for children with AIDS. And little did she know that when she got to Guyana, that the people she was going to be working with were drug addicts that were broken. And they were the last chance. They're called the A-Team. And they live in a little squalid house. And they have destroyed their families. And their families had just kicked them to the curb. And they saw my wife. And they found out that her husband had relapsed. And they saw her pain. And their families would have nothing to do with them. But they could love her. And they could love my family. They protected her. And they took care of her. And they watched out for her. And they loved her. And they loved her like Christ loved her. And it was because of their love that my wife changed. Because she hated drug addicts when she went to Guyana. Because she hated me. And drug addicts that didn't know me loved her. And she came back and we started to talk. You know, and God started to heal our relationship and our family because I was obedient to the call. God didn't say fix your family. He didn't say fix your business. God said, George, bring Jesus Christ to addicts. And I was obedient to that task and got the opportunity to participate in a lot of cool things, you know, and the family started getting right. We started getting together, and I made a commitment to stay where I was at for 6 months. And, you know, the 6 months was up. The kids were ready for Daddy to come home. And I said, honey, the 6 months is up. I'm ready to come home. And she's like, I'm not ready for you to come home. I don't trust you. And the humanist in me wants, well, why don't you trust me? You know, I've been clean 6 months. Why don't you trust me? You know, and the Christ in me, I don't trust me. You know, who am I to judge her? You know, and I had to come to an understanding that, yeah, I understand you don't trust me. And I told her, I said, and I let that go, and I kind of said, honey, I understand how you feel. You know, I will support you and the kids. I will keep you accustomed to where you're at and what's going on, but I'm not going to wait for you. I'm moving on with my life. And I turned her over. You know, I turned my wife over to God. And when I did that, the next day she called me up and said, I'm ready for you to come home. You know, go figure. And, you know, I could qualify as a codependent. I want to fix everybody too, so but I ain't got that kind of power. You know, when I came home, and I'd love to tell you it was beautiful, but it wasn't. I couldn't even go to the bathroom without my kids walking in on me. What you doing, Daddy? Where you at? You know, Daddy, where you at? You ain't called me, you know, phone ringing 100 times every hour and whatever, you know. And the Christ in me has to understand that they care. You know, I have to be grateful that that my family still thought enough of me to be concerned. You know, and trust is, I must earn this. You know, life's good. We're getting along great. You know, at about a year clean, my wife and I, she wanted to have a recovery Bible study. We found this little pastor was at our church. She said, you ever heard of Celebrate Recovery? No, never heard of Celebrate Recovery. And she said, well, would you like to start it? So we started Celebrate Recovery at Pine Valley. You know, the congregation said, you're going to let those people in here? This same church that a year earlier said, your kind don't belong here, slowly, you know, because I was doing what God asked me to do, you know, quietly slipped in the back door, that type of stuff, you know. And you're going to let those people come here? And what do you mean those people? What do you mean, sinners? You know, and the church is not a hotel for saints. It's a hospital for sinners. Jesus didn't come for the well. He came for the sick. You know, and Jesus didn't hang out with people that talked about Jesus. You know, it's real important for me to remember that. You know, Jesus hung out with people that didn't know Jesus. And God told me, George, I want you to bring Jesus Christ to addicts. So we started Celebrate Recovery, and we've been doing it 6 years. It took 4 years for that church to take ownership of that ministry. Not ownership, but to accept that ministry. You know, and to where it's blossomed, you know, from a small little crowd to 125 on a Friday night. Just a beautiful thing. It has transformed that church and changed it. My daughter, she, one night in active addiction, I lashed out at her and I said, I hate you. She was being a teenager, just freaking on me, you know. And you ever said anything and you wish you could have pulled it back? You know, and I tore that little girl up that night when I said that. And immediately when I said it, I was like, you know, but I'd done the damage. And she got her chance to return that favor when the relapse came to a head, and she said, and she added, Daddy, I hate you, I wish you'd die. You know, when I came home and my little girl didn't act the same to me, you know, and she was different towards me, and I knew that I'd hurt her, you know, and the humanness in me wanted to fix her and to explain to her, you know, what's going on, you know. But the Christ in me had to accept the fact that she might never forgive me. And she might never love me the same. And that's hard to handle, you know. But I had to come to grips with that it might never be the same. And I accepted the fact. And I couldn't fix her. And my little girl went on a spiritual journey. And when she was on that spiritual journey, she found out that she only loved God as much as the person she hated the most. And that person was me. So tonight, if you're sitting there and you got somebody that you just can't stand, that's how much you love God. So think about that. And God loves that person the same as He loves you. And I'd love to tell you it was a hallmark moment when my little girl came home, but one day in passing in the house, she just kind of walked by and she said, Daddy, I forgive you. You can't buy that. God did that. God did that. I was obedient. God said, George, bring Jesus Christ to addicts. I'll take care of the rest. And He did that. You know, about 3 years ago, George was getting real clean. I was getting better, getting healthier, doing the deal, and my wife started getting sicker. She came to Celebrate Recovery as a codependent. And she developed the bipolar condition. You know, and I don't understand chronic depression. I don't understand, you know, I don't understand it. And I struggle. I struggle with somebody that can't get out of bed. You know, and the humanness in me wants to rant and rave and grab her by the neck and say, get up! But the Christ in me has to accept the fact that it is what it is. You know, and but about 3 years ago, I came home and she had gotten real sick, and I came in to find her in a bathtub full of cold water with an empty bottle of tranquilizers and a bottle of wine next to the tub where she had tried to commit suicide. My children were there, like, Daddy, what's going on? What's going on? And in this relationship with Christ, I have learned that when crap happens, do the next right thing. Do the next right thing. Do the next right thing. I don't have to react and do the next right thing. And I had been through overdoses and do the next right thing, you know, and straighten it up. And, you know, and was able to clear the head and get things going on. talked to the families and all her family, and she had called them all and said she was leaving and all this, you know, what's going on, you know, and the shoes were reversed. You know, she had been there when I did my deal, you know, and I was obedient to God's call, and I was there when, and the roles were reversed. And the next day, man, I was just furious at God. I was like, damn it, God, why? God, why are you doing this to us? We have been through so much. You know, we had been through so much. Well, you know those two kids, my two teenagers who just couldn't look at me, and one of them hated me. You know, we had been on a mission trip 3 years earlier up in Buchanan County, Virginia, up in Appalachia. And we'd done some work for this poor lady. She didn't have anything. She had a lot, but she didn't have nothing. We did some work on her home, and we loved her, and she loved us, and there was just a bond developed. And I hadn't spoken to her in 3 years, and I got a phone call, and it was her. And she said, George, I was looking through some papers, and I saw your number, and I just felt like you needed a call. I knew that was God calling. You know, God knew at that moment He needed to speak to me, because I was at that point where I was angry, and I was so furious, and He needed to let me know that I'm here, George. I got her. You can't fix her. You can't take care of her. I got her. I didn't ask you to fix her. I said, George, you bring Jesus Christ to Addicts, and I will take care of the rest. You know, my wife today's got about 2 years and 4 months clean. You know, I couldn't fix her. God took care of that. You know, when the economy went to crap, we had 2 vehicles repossessed and had 4 given to us. 2 better than 2 that were repossessed. Go figure. You know, because what could I, sure, take them. God said, I got a better plan. He'd been trying to tell us for years to quit living beyond our means. So He said, well, I'll just make it happen. I'll do away with all your payments, you know. And, you know, life is good today. I got a teenage son that's a freshman at UNC Charlotte that's following in my footsteps. You know, he's selling marijuana, smoking like a broke stove. I can't fix him. I can't change him. I can't beat it out of him. You know, I got to put him in God's hands. You know, I hate that for my child. You know, he's just like me. And I wouldn't wish what I went through on my worst enemy. But I had to turn him over. You know, I can love him. I can be there for him. I ain't got to support what he's doing. I could set some boundaries and tell him, you can't do it when you come home, but I'll always love you in spite of what you do. You know, and if nothing else tonight, I just want to tell you this, that you are loved. If you don't feel loved tonight, there is one that loves you more than you can ever imagine. There is one that loved you enough to die for you. Amen. That took the worst beating could possibly be handed out. That just did all that because that person loved you. And that one is Jesus. It was God in the flesh. You know, and if you've never had that, if you've never surrendered all you had, what better time than the present, you know, to trudge this road of happy destiny. Love you guys. Thanks for letting me be here.